Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to this evening's Maths My Way webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ciara Walsh. I am the head of primary publishing here at Folan's and I'm joining you tonight from Folan's HQ where the wind and rain is absolutely battering the window outside. So if you can hear that in the background, I apologise. So tonight we're going to have a look into Maths My Way for 1st to 6th class. If you're more interested in the infant part of Maths My Way, or you want to see that as well, we will have another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks' time on that. So tonight, 1st to 6th. I'll just very briefly run through the agenda for this evening, and then I will hand you over to some of, our main presenter for this evening, but let's see. Okay. So agenda, welcome from me as you're currently experiencing. I will not be here long. Then we're going to look at using Maths My Way with Patrick Neary, who is our series editor and co-author of 1st to 6th class. Some of you may have seen him before talking about Maths My Way. He's going to do stuff a few different things this evening, looking particularly at how Maths My Way really maps to the curriculum and really supports the curriculum. Then we are going to have a little panel discussion. Patrick and I are going to be joined by Siobhan Costello and Maggie Landers from Educate Together in Limerick, who have been using the programme this year, and they're going to tell us a little bit about how they're getting on with it, the impact they've seen with the programme, how they decided to use it, and some of the challenges they faced in implementing it. Then we'll have a Q&A at the end. All four of us will be available for that, so you can drop questions into the chat throughout the session this evening. We'll reply in the chat, and then we'll also have questions at the end, which I can put to Patrick, Siobhan and Maggie. And then we'll have a quick little wrap up at the end with some next steps about what you can do if you're interested in exploring Maths My Way further or any of our other primary maths programs. So without further ado, well, let's get stuck in. We'll try not to keep you here too long this evening, and I'll hand you over to Patrick, who's going to take you through some bits and pieces about using Maths My Way. Okay, Patrick, I'll share my screen, let you take over. Perfect, Patrick.
Can we see that okay?
Yeah, all good. I'll knock myself the camera off here and let you go ahead.
Thanks, Ciara. So it's great to be here this evening again. For anyone whose first time it is here with us at Maths My Way webinar, my name is Patrick Neary. I'm teaching in St. Cronan's Senior National School in Swords. And back when I was doing my undergrad in St. Pat's in Drumcondra, I was always very interested in maths education and went on to do a master's in the area. And since then, I've been involved in different projects and bits of research in the area of maths education. So it's an area I've kept an interest in, which then led to getting the great opportunity to work with Folan's on this project. This year I'm teaching 3rd class, and I'm delighted to be using Maths My Way with my class this year. So it's lovely to have gone through the whole stage of writing, editing, and then actually getting to use it in my own classroom as well, and share some of that with you this evening. With the programme, I was co-author and series editor from 1st to 6th class. So I've been across the whole programme, looked at every lesson, looked at it all. And this evening, I'll be focusing on the structure of the programme and really showing how it's embedded with the primary maths curriculum, because that's kind of the big reason why we're all here and why the book exists is because of the new primary maths curriculum. So here you'll see the plan for the rollout of the curriculum as it was outlined in Circular 39 2023. So it was first introduced back in 2023. Then we had a year for implementation where we had our first closure day. And since 2025, since September 2025, we're in the embedding stage. But now it's important not to panic when you see some of these years and think where what maybe we might have been expected to do, and to remember that it's a gradual process and that it's a flexible process for schools. This school year is the introductory phase for the primary curriculum framework. I'm sure lots of you have had your closure days for the framework. And from next school year onwards, we'll have structured support by curriculum area for this next 6 years. So we'll be choosing schools in conjunction with our AGA advisors to pick which areas we're going to focus on for over the next 6 years. And when you choose STEM, you'll be looking at embedding the entire specification. So that'll be science, technology, engineering, and maths. So I guess the more we do now to help us with that, the easier it'll be when it comes to the year that you choose to look at STEM itself. Important to always remember that, you know, maths is still being embedded, and it will be being embedded over several years. So it's not, nobody is expected to overnight but suddenly be teaching maths exactly as the new curriculum says. You know, it's a process. And our aim with Maths My Way is to help you embed the practices of the curriculum in your schools. We're thinking of you as teachers and you as curriculum leaders and school leaders within your school. I want to start just very briefly looking at one infographic from the curriculum. And these are the 4 elements of the curriculum. It's on page 81, and I think this is just an excellent tool if the curriculum is new to you. It's a great self-reflection tool in terms of how are you getting on with the elements of the new curriculum. You know, I use it as kind of a self-audit in like what areas am I feeling comfortable with? What areas maybe do I need a little bit more support with? And it's just a nice way of looking at your teaching and looking at maths in your classroom. So we're going to just look at how I might do that with reasoning. So these are the statements from the elements. So the first one is like analyze and deduce ideas, strategies, and solutions. And I turn that into a question to maybe see what's going on in my own classroom. So I might ask, like, do my students have the opportunity to analyze and deduce ideas, strategies, and solutions? Am I creating opportunities in my lessons over the weeks and months for children to get to do that? Do they have the chance to argue and justify their thinking? Often we're telling the children to stop arguing, but this time we want them to argue and really get into the maths and to start like that they're that invested in what they're talking about that they're arguing and justifying their thinking. Is that something that you can point to an example where, you know, I remember when I was teaching this topic, there was great discussion where the children were disagreeing with each other and arguing and really trying to convince people of their point of view. So just wanted to mention at the start, and I will come back to this page throughout tonight's webinar, but it's a great tool to maybe take some time to reflect on which elements you feel comfortable with, which ones maybe are being used consistently throughout your teaching, and which ones you might focus on. It's often, if you try to do too much at once, it can be daunting. So I think a tool like this there, and from the curriculum itself, where you can find maybe 1 or 2 things to focus on at a time is a great way to get started with the new curriculum. So here you see the contents of the 3rd class book, and I've put this up to show you how we've broken the curriculum down into 30 units and 2 look back units at the start and the end of the book. For anyone who is starting a new curriculum program in September, I just highly recommend skipping the revision or the look back unit at the start of the book. You know, that unit is designed for students who've completed the class level the year before. So this is the 3rd class book. So the Let's Get Started unit will look at content covered in Maths My Way 2nd class. So if it's their first time using a book that's been designed for the new curriculum, chances are the children, that'll be very new for the children, and, you know, could lead to a very stressful September. So if you're implementing a new book in September, I just highly recommend starting with skipping the revision chapter and starting with the 1st chapter of content, just as a way of easing yourself into it and creating more space for those first few units. You'll see here the contents aligned across 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th class. So to help with whole school planning and the whole school plan, we've aligned the topics as much as possible so that when you're teaching, say, for example, area in third class, that's also coming up in fourth, fifth, and sixth class. In particular, each stage, so first and second, third and fourth being stage 3, and fifth and sixth being stage 4, they're aligned very closely. And then we've tried to keep that, as you can see with the different colors there, we've tried to keep the rest of the alignment as consistent as possible across the books. You're obviously welcome in your long-term plans to adjust these, the order that units are taught in as appropriate to your school and your setting. This is just our suggested order of covering them. So with each kind of fortnight, then you have your fortnightly plan, and I found these a real lifesaver this year in that they are aligned to the new planning guidelines with the maths curriculum itself. They have your learning outcomes, your mathematical concepts, mathematical language that might come up during the lesson, your learning experiences, your assessment, differentiation. Everything you need from a planning perspective is here for you. And I really want to highlight this middle section here, which is the focus of new learning. So this is where we pull out targets that we've chosen to focus on for the new learning in this week. And this is particular for the chapter fractions 2 in third class. There are 4 fraction units across the stage. So between third and fourth class, there's 4 different fraction units. And we've taken the broad learning outcomes that go with that and broken it down into these targets that are paced then across the 4 units of the topic. So here you have your 4 different targets that you'd be and focuses that you'd be looking at in this particular week. You might wonder, like, where did we come up with these targets, or where did the focus come from? And if you go to the toolkit and the progression steps, you'll see that we really stayed true to these in writing Maths My Way, making sure that when you're using the program, that you feel confident that what's in the toolkit and what's in these steps is also in the program there for you. So just one example here. From step G, you'll see the step compares and orders unit fractions with different denominators. And in lesson 3 here, for the third focus of new learning, you similarly have compare and order unit fractions using models. Now, for fractions alone, there's 2 or 3 pages of steps in the toolkit to go with this topic. So we've put them together. We've looked at them across the different elements and combined them to make in ways that are sensible for teaching. So in the curriculum example here, it didn't have the word models. Models will be down in the communication element, but we've included that in this focus of new learning for that particular lesson because it fitted nicely, and we're combining the elements in these targets. So that's your fortnightly plan. And the fortnightly plan really gives you an overview of how Maths My Way works. In that, for each unit, you have the 4 areas that you're going to be focusing on for new learning. And they're each a target for each of the 4 main lessons. So here you'll see the 4 title pages for the teaching slides that go with each lesson. So I'm teaching fractions 2 to third class. I have 4 core lessons, each one with a set of slides, and each of those lessons also has 1 page in the student book. There are also 2 practice pages in the student book to go with each unit. On the first slide, you see the focus of new learning that matches from your fortnightly plan. And you'll also see the icons with the concrete resources that are recommended for the lesson. At the start of the year, particularly if it's their first time using a new curriculum program, I found that sometimes we might have spent even 2 days completing one lesson. And that's completely normal. Like, remember that implementing this new curriculum is going to be gradual and flexible. It's going to take time, in particular when you start something new, for teachers to get used to using it, for children getting used to some of the new methodologies and practices. So, take your time with it as you get started. So we're going to look a bit closer at these lessons now and just look at some of the activities that come up and see how they connect back to the element of reasoning. So here you'll see an introductory activity, starting with our concrete resource. Here we're just using paper strips, keeping it to something that's very accessible in all schools, but that can pack a meaningful punch in terms of visualization. And the children were using strips of paper to make halves, quarters, and eighths. And this task, it was incredibly concrete, visual, helped the children really see what was going on with these new words that they were learning, with these fractions. Really helped them to get that image in their head. Once the children had time manipulating the paper and looking at the different fractions, then later in the week we move on to comparing the fractions. So in each pair, which fraction of the same whole is greater? And the children are asked to convince a partner using fraction circles or strips. So it's not just about an answer. It's about convincing of how do you know. And we have our maths language box there with some of the vocabulary that might come up as the children are working through the activity. So if we go back to our reasoning element from the curriculum and look at the idea of argue and justify their thinking. Are we creating those opportunities for children to argue and justify their thinking? Really getting that maths talk going, that not just about an answer, but how do you know that this one is greater? How are you justifying it? The next activity after they've compared two fractions is to compare a set of fractions. So they had these 4 fractions to compare and put them in order from smallest to greatest. This is one I did with my class recently, and after doing the activity I showed you on the previous screen, I gave them this to do, and loads of the children started putting up their hands going, oh, come on, give us a challenge. These are too easy, and loads of things like that. They had this activity done in seconds. They really got that, the smaller the denominator, the greater the fraction. So that a quarter, because four is the smallest denominator, that means that would be the greatest. Very few children were relying on their strips to help them with this. So we have the idea of parallel tasks, where as teachers, we adapt tasks to suit the needs of the children in front of us. So kept the question the exact same, but put 4 different fractions up on the board. So question was familiar, but this time I gave them 1/3, 1/6, 1/7, and 1/9. Fractions that, they hadn't looked at, they hadn't folded paper to make these fractions, but they were still fractions. They were still kind of in the realm of where we were with the lesson. So immediately, like, the children were able to put these in order from smallest to greatest. And that's where they're generalizing their learning to other areas. So they saw what was going on with the fractions they had actually made and actually put in order, but they were able to build on that to unknown fractions, where you're making those connections out to what they haven't looked at, maybe with the concrete. They also found this one, as I said, very easy, and they were again asking, no, give us a challenge, give us a challenge. So next, with another parallel task, went back to the denominators they were familiar with, so the halves, quarters, eighths in particular, but changed the numerator. So it was looking at 3/4, or looking at, like, comparing 3/4 and 1/2. So in their heads before this, they had a rule figured out, or a generalization figured out, for when we were looking at unit fractions with a numerator of 1. And the rule was that the bigger the denominator, the smaller the fraction. and the inverse also true. But now that we change the numerator, now that it's not 1 on top, that rule doesn't always hold. So good way of like questioning or generalizing to just get them thinking. They ended up then going back to the resources, getting those strips out again to help them with the comparisons as they went. So I think the parallel tasks are really powerful, that you don't have to go explaining a brand new question again. You're just changing the numbers. In this case, it was as simple as writing 4 new fractions up on the whiteboard and just let's try with these 4. And it gives flexibility to see, can you push the thinking on a little bit? Is there scope here? And equally, we can go the other way too. And if children are finding something very challenging, we can make the numbers smaller to let them to make it easier in that way. The next lesson then moved on to building on what they knew about fractions to find fractions of a set. And here it was kind of one problem where 5 children are sharing 30 cherries equally. How many will each get, and what fraction of the set they get? And the challenge here was to solve this in many different ways, or how many different ways could they do it, and really giving that agency and kind of building that maths identity, that there's more than one way to be a mathematician. There's more than one way to solve problems. So these are animations we've made to illustrate what the children did on their whiteboards. But like one child drew 5 circles and shared 30 dots in between them. Didn't take long on a whiteboard, and a really strong visual representation of what's going on. Some children counted in 5s and found that 6 5s were 30. They were very familiar with counting in 5s from all the work we've been doing on multiplication. Some children used cubes and took 30 cubes and split them up. And some children used trial and error. So one girl said, well, I know 5 times 5 is 25. That's too small, so I'll try 6 times 5, and that gave her 30. So a huge variety of different ideas coming up here. And we had great discussions afterwards where these ideas were put up onto the whiteboard with the children's names beside them of who came up with which way, and talked about maybe how they might do it if they were doing it again. So we're back to our element where we're looking at reasoning. And here's a real opportunity for children to analyze and deduce ideas, strategies, and solutions. So they're coming up with their different ways, but then when we look at it as a whole class afterwards, we're seeing maybe whose strategy might I try if I was doing a question like this again. And we're building on what each other are bringing to the lesson. Okay, some ways to extend it further. So say, for example, you had a student who finished this very quickly and you wanted to give them an extra challenge. You might say, prove it to me. Draw a picture to convince me. You could say, find someone at your table who did it a different way, explain your way to them and listen to their way. You can again use parallel tasks. So what if there were 80 cherries? Or extending the other way, what if there were 10 cherries? So adapting the numbers to suit the children in your room. And can you make and solve your own version of the cherries problem? And then even if you had a couple of children doing that, they could swap them and work together on that. Okay, I'm going to flip briefly now into the Folens platform itself, and we're going to have a look at how the slides look in the classroom and how these strategies come up. So at the start of each lesson, I'd always suggest going through the slides before beginning. In my classroom, I prefer to use examples that the children generate themselves and have whole class discussions about what they've come up with on their whiteboards or in their copies and putting it up on the board. So like the examples I showed you earlier, that's what I like to focus on. So I don't always put up the slides, some of the slides that I'll show you now, on the board and go through them with the class themselves, but I always go through them before teaching. so that I have an idea of what is expected from the children, and it gives you an idea of what we're looking for with the different activities. So I'm just going to flick into that. Okay, so this is your title, like the title page for lesson 4 in this particular unit. We always suggest making the slides full screen before you start teaching, because it just makes everything as big as possible and lets the interactive polypad elements work. It just makes them better to work. You can click with the play button to move from activity to activity. So here you'll see the cherry problem that we were just speaking about. And you also have the menu button on the side where you can flick in between different slides on things. So if you only got halfway through a lesson one day, you can just flick in there and navigate to what you're looking for. So this is the one that I got the children to do on their whiteboards. We gathered all the information back up on the board, but embedded in Maths My Way and the slides itself, we also have the strategies there for you, because this is like, some of this will be new to some people, and we really wanted to have the support there for you. So you see the example where I use 30 counters, there are 5 children, and we can animate it really nicely to show those being shared between the different children. Each child gets 6 cherries. There are 5 equal groups in total, and each child gets 1/5. So you see the strategy here modeled out, explained. This might be something you want to show to the children, or if it's something that's already come up, that's perfectly fine too. But having a look at it beforehand really gives you a sense of the focus of learning for the lesson. A second strategy then that comes up is, and our Maths My Way characters share these strategies with us. I drew a model like this. So we have our bar model, and it's all animated with the images coming up and being shared between the different parts of the model and solving the problem for us. Sometimes if a strategy was on the slides, like this one, that hadn't come up during class discussion, you could show it at this stage, like flick through to this part of it and ask the children, this is how Wind solved it. Do you have any idea what he was doing? Or do you have, like, what was Wind's strategy? And then you're looking at a new strategy, but not from a point of view of, now you need to learn this off and you have to do this 20 times. It's more flexible in that, like, this is another way of solving it. Does it make sense to us? There's lots of strategies on the slides, and it's not expected that every child learns how to do every strategy. The strategies are here to show that we're all individual learners. We all have different ways of approaching problems, but we're also all mathematicians, and we can all come to a solution. So it's not a case of using each one of them, but more showing that there's variety there. And it's up to you as a teacher to choose which ones then you show, which ones maybe you start with seeing what comes from the class themselves as they work on the problem. And then you might have 1 or 2 in the back of your mind that, well, if this one doesn't come up, I'm going to show this, and we're going to have a look at this one as well. And it's just a kind of a flexible way of using these slides to really suit what's happened in your class and what are your personal goals as a teacher when you're teaching them. Okay, I'm just going to have one more slide to share. So just to finish off then, these are just a couple of activities we've chosen for each of the class levels, just to give you a flavour of the types of activities that are in Maths My Way. When you get the slides sent to you, there's links on each of these that'll bring you out to the different activities. And I would really suggest, like, if you're considering using Maths My Way next year, get your hands on a copy. Kira's going to talk about it later, but really do give it a go this year. to try it out with your class. In third class, recently we did the Chance unit, which is a lovely standalone kind of unit, and the children absolutely adored the lessons in there. So it might be, if you're teaching third class, might be one you'd like to give a go when you want to teach Chance this year. But definitely try out some of the lessons yourself. Try them in your classroom before you make the big decision of what program you're going with. I've just loved having the chance to use it in my room this year to see how well the children are reacting to it, and hopefully you see similar positives, and that it makes implementing and embedding the maths curriculum as easy as possible for you. So I'll pass back to Ciara then.
Thank you very much, Patrick. That was great. And as Patrick said, we'll share all these slides with you all tomorrow, and there's links in there so you can click in and find all those activities if you want to try them out, or any other activities. I'll cover that a little bit at the end as well, just about what you can do next in terms of trialing the program and so on. But first of all, before we do that, I'd like to welcome Siobhan and Maggie on to join us, just have a little chat about their experience of using Maths My Way in their school. So hopefully they can, oh, there we go, there's Siobhan, perfect. And hopefully Maggie is able to, yeah, perfect, great. Can are we both okay with our mics and everything? I think yours is still on mute there, Maggie. Great, perfect. So ladies, I'll let you just introduce yourselves first, just where you teach and your role with it in the school. So Siobhan, I might start with you.
Yeah, so I am Siobhan, and we both teach, myself and Maggie, in Limerick Educate Together. I'm the 5th class teacher, and I'm also the maths coordinator in the school. So I suppose I was big in choosing which program to use and what we were going to do, and just kind of introducing the new curriculum in general.
Lovely, thanks,
Hi.
Siobhan.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm the 6th class teacher, and I'm Siobhan's cheerleader. So whatever she wants to do, I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. So, and Patrick's going to stay on here for this chat as well. So, if you've anything to add, Patrick, you can jump in as well. So just I'll start with you, Siobhan, because obviously it's maths coordinator. Thinking back to when you were first preparing for this new primary maths curriculum coming in, what were the key priorities for you in your role as coordinator, and then how did Maths My Way fit into that plan for you?
Yeah, so I suppose our biggest thing at the beginning when we were implementing it or looking at it was to make it as manageable as we could for the teachers. You don't want to like overload everyone and just throw the book at them and be like, there you go, do that. So we kind of broke it down into sections. And what we actually started with was we looked at the pedagogical practices is where we started, and we actually kind of took one at a time. So like started, I know, like maths talk, and I would introduce it at like a staff meeting. We would talk about it. I'd explain, how to do it or whatever. Would have done it in my own classroom, give people examples, like kind of practical ways of doing it, showing them some concrete examples, maybe taking pictures of the kids doing whatever they were doing. And we kind of started then building all the different pedagogical practices from that. Because when you start with one, they all kind of lend into each other then. So that's kind of where we started, and we wanted to really like start focusing on like maths journals and stuff, because we felt that really aligned with all the practices really well. And I also wanted to keep it consistent across the whole school, so to make sure that we were all kind of doing the same thing. So that was really like what we were looking at, and making sure that we got a lot of, I suppose, as much active learning and hands-on that we could, because obviously that's a big component within the new curriculum. So when we started looking at books and things, Maths My Way really kind of stood out to me because it kind of fit what we were doing the best. We found that like the slides, they were really child friendly, the designs were lovely, the characters the kids found very engaging. Even in using it myself at the beginning of the year, I'd forget some of the characters. They knew them straight away. They really it really clicked with them. Excuse me, sorry. And it was just a really good visual support for the children then to have all these slides on the screen all the time. So really liked the layout of those. Another thing I suppose with Maths My Way that both myself and Maggie really liked was that it's linked with the polypad, which we would have used and I split ourselves, and we really liked the polypad before we even started looking at like different books. So the fact that that was linked within the program really kind of appealed to us there as well. And then I suppose it just gave us the continuity that we were looking for throughout the classes and throughout the schools. I also really liked the plans, you know, the planning, and Patrick had shown like some of the planning that he had done. We had looked at, again, making our planning really consistent across the classes, and the headings that we had like perfectly matched with what he had done. So that's kind of why I suppose the program really appealed to us the most, that it really just helped with what we had already started implementing by looking at the pedagogical practices, the maths talk, the, you know, all the stuff that we had done. And it just really, I suppose Maths My Way, we found, was the one that really appealed to us the most.
Yeah. It's great to hear that it fit in so well with what you were already doing.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure it wasn't without its challenges taking on something new. So Maggie, you might speak to that a little bit in terms of any of the challenges you did face when you first took it on. Because I mean, as Patrick said as well, it's a big change going into a new curriculum and taking on a new program to go with it. So you might talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I suppose it's important to say that the challenges I faced implementing it would be the same no matter what new program we would have gone with. We were quite lucky. Last year was more of an exploration year, that we were really focusing in on the IDA, like the hub, and using all of those like engaging, cognitively challenging tasks and the maths eyes and things like that. So in a sense, I found the biggest challenge is actually just time, having time.
Yeah.
For me as a 6th class teacher, I felt like when I was looking at my week, I couldn't look at it day by day, because the slides, like there's a huge amount of learning experiences, and as a very excitable teacher, like I'd want to do all of them, but it's not realistic. So therefore, like the time it takes just to go through we'll say the content for the week, to have a sense of what is this journey going to look like? What are my priorities this week? Like looking at the slides, looking at the maths eyes that are linked with the slides, looking at the games that are linked with the slides, looking at the pupils book, like that does take time if you want to try and start like getting your head around it, and, you know, like being quite productive and quite, you know, using your time quite smartly with the children. So that was one area, but again, that would be the same no matter what new program we would be using. On the plus side, like when I compare this year to last year, where we were kind of using an old program, but also trying to like include lots of stuff from the Math Hub and looking for things, that was hugely intense, because you're going to multiple different sources. Whereas with the Maths My Way, I found that I didn't have to worry about balancing out the pedagogical practices. It was actually done really well for me. So for me, it was more like picking out what are the learning experiences I want like the students in my class to explore this week, which ones will I keep in and which ones will I leave out. So that was one thing, it's the time. The slides, I think, because there's not a printout of the slides, or if there is, I can't find it. I found that like when I was planning, I had to like click through the slides.
Yeah.
And I found that a bit time consuming, and the
And I
play
will
button
say,
is my nemesis.
I will answer that question as well and say there isn't a printout because there's so much animation in them. You know,
Yeah.
if they were printed, you wouldn't be able to see what was happening. So yeah.
Yeah. But it's just like it's that you know, I kind of want to see where they're going with this. So even the animation, like you have to click the button each time, like what's coming up next, what's coming up next, what's coming up next.
Yeah.
But again, I'm like, that's neither here nor there, to be perfectly honest with you. That was one thing. Another thing I noticed for myself, because I suppose I've been teaching 6th class for a good few years now, and we were using a program, how I interpreted the learning outcomes and how I interpreted what the elements feel like in my classroom, then obviously are interpreted differently because it's new and it's a different program. So it was just like having the confidence myself to kind of go a different direction with these learning outcomes and what it will look like as learning experiences, and the openness of it. And then like some things that I wouldn't agree with, like, oh, will I just give it a go anyway, or will I just stick to what I know? And because like this year we're being quite open and quite flexible, I kind of did a bit of both. And the majority of the time, actually, I did tend to go towards the Maths My Way, the way that they were interpreting them. And that was literally for maybe 2 or 3 concepts. It was like, oh, I'm not really sure if this is how I interpret it, how I interpret this from the learning continua or something like that. But it was interesting to see, as like as the lessons progressed, how actually the way that they are scaffolded towards works much better than my way, which would have been quite like independent sort of learning experiences for the kids. Another question I think somebody had was like, what did the students find challenging about it? As a sixth class teacher. And I suppose going into it and looking at the books, I think we got the books a little bit earlier before the school year had closed out last year. And I was quite concerned about the gaps in knowledge. I thought that was going to be my biggest challenge. But in actual fact, the gaps in knowledge, because it's so interactive and so engaging, like the kids kind of picked up quickly what was going on. What I found, they found quite mentally tiring and they found quite challenging is that like a lot of the onus of learning is on them now. So you know more like they're not this empty vessel to be filled anymore, that they are the people who are developing and reconstructing these mathematical ideas. They are the people coming up with the strategies and the solutions. They have to be very accountable for their learning. They have to be active listeners. They have to have a sense of metacognition, this ability to think about their thinking and think about other people's thinking and attend. So like this idea that they are responsible or they have the self-awareness to know that I need to be listening to other students in this classroom, because it's not the teacher standing at the top of the class anymore. And typically speaking, I don't stand at the top of the class, like I stand at the back of the class, because this is about ye, this is not about me. And it's quite interesting to see how tiring that is for students, and like how quickly they can just zone out, because all they're thinking about is, oh, my hand is up, so I'm thinking about what my answer is going to be, but I've not a clue what Penelope in the corner has just said. So they found that really challenging. Now, I mean, it depends, I suppose, on the classes you get. I'm very lucky. I teach two separate groups, so we have two sixth classes in our school. So we do a transition thing where they have to move from teacher to teacher in preparation for secondary school. So it's interesting to see how different classes have different dispositions towards learning, and how this program has really just strengthened everyone's ability to be accountable for their own learning. The other kind like challenge that I have found, and again, I think it's just more our expectations of what mathematics looks like now in the classroom is, it's very active learning. Like there's, of course, students need to be writing in their copybook. Of course, students, are going to be answering questions out of a book, but that's not what the majority of the lesson is anymore. It is them engaging in either think, pair, share, or cognitively challenging tasks, or even cognitive conflict, and having these like respectful debates and arguments. And for like the pace of the class, I find, and I still find, quite tricky, because we go down rabbit holes, but do we come back out of them is the question. So it's like, as a teacher, I have to have this very like clear overarching focus of like, what is the outcome today? What are we expected to take away from this, from this learning experience? Because it is so playful, and like even today they were on the polypad and we were doing like 3D shapes and they had different challenges to do. But like in my head, I had to go, okay, but at the end of the day, like they need to know like what is the similarities and differences between prisms and pyramids. Like they need to know that at the end of the day. So all this fantastical stuff is amazing, but at the end of the day, they come away going, oh gosh, that's great crack. But they still don't know what a prism is or a pyramid is, or how they're similar or different, or the properties, characteristics. It's all for nothing. So as a teacher, like the pedagogical practices are brilliant, but you still have to have a very clear idea of this is the outcome.
You're keeping that at the forefront of your mind as you work through it.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting as well from your perspective, because it's sixth class. So these children have had 6-7 years of school where they weren't really working that way. So it's very different when, as opposed to if you've got a younger class coming into you. So Maggie, I really want to ask you as well about the impact you've seen from Maths My Way. But before I do that, I'm just going to check in with Patrick about your experience of bringing the program in, because you've been teaching third class this year, so you've seen hands-on, it's one thing authoring it and testing it out and bits and pieces, but just to speak to kind of what Maggie has said and how your experiences maybe are the same and different, to use a kind of typical maths my way question.
Yeah, I think like it's lovely to hear Siobhan and Maggie's experiences there. I'd sit and listen all day. I think what Maggie mentioned there about like the teacher's own kind of understanding of the lesson and the series and the trajectory and what the aim is that we're aiming at over, not even over just maybe one class level, but over the entire stage is so important. And I think that's very time consuming right now because it's new. But as we start to use this curriculum more and more, hopefully we'll be as familiar with that trajectory that we're hoping, the journey we're hoping to bring children on, as we were with the 1999 curriculum. In the other, you mentioned about the children listening to each other. I had such a eureka moment only 2 weeks ago where one girl put up her hand and she said, she started her sentence with, "My way is very similar to Sarah's way of doing it." And I was like, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. She didn't just launch into what she was saying herself. She had really actually, without like prompting or anything, had just really listened to what had gone on beforehand and connected her way into it. In terms of the difference, I guess, between third and sixth, I found the start of the year more challenging than it is now. I find when I'm doing a topic that they have less experience, or there might be less kind of prior learning that they would be expected to have from a previous book, that those topics are very much nicer to teach than ones where maybe there would have been a lot of background work done in the second class book that they didn't experience.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting when Patrick would have said that to me throughout the year, as as I was asking him how he was getting on, the topics like addition or subtraction, where there was a lot of background knowledge covered in first and second, but in a more old curriculum way, maybe, that they were much more challenging. Whereas when he got to the new third class, things like multiplication, it really took off for them. So, and I think the takeaway from that is that this is not it's not all going to work perfectly from the beginning with a new curriculum, and it's going to take time as you move up through the years, and it will be easier in the younger years, and it'll be more challenging in the senior years initially. But to come back to you, Maggie, then on your class and how they've been getting on, what kind of changes have you noticed? And you've touched on it a little bit already in terms of some of the things you've noticed they've started to do and taking responsibility for their learning. Did you have any particular moments where you thought, yeah, this program's having a positive impact?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say their disposition towards mathematics has greatly changed this year. And it was like the strangest kind of, this Christmas break where the kids bring you in like homemade cards and like chocolates and all of this stuff. And the amount of cards I got from children that were about mathematics, like, oh my God. And they're all like Christmas trees decorated in mathematical symbols. And so it's just, it's become quite a fun thing for them. I think for a lot of them, and I felt one of the groups I had just really such a fixed mindset about maths. I can't do it. I hate it. And and talking to their fifth class teacher about it, and it was just like, how do we push past this barrier? And using the Maths My Way, it's a completely different atmosphere, so that like the tenseness and the quietness of the classroom has gone. And when you walk in or you're in the maths class, and the idea, it's this like constant noise, but it's this sound of children like talking and thinking and sharing their ideas and not being afraid to speak up. I mean, in September, it's just like I don't do hands up. I just call people's name and what you think about that. And when it's just stony silence and you're listening to the crickets and you're like, what's happening here? It was this real tense atmosphere that I'm afraid to be wrong, or people are going to laugh at me, or like I'm no good at maths. And it was just this quite intense negativity towards mathematics. And it's through this playfulness and this, what do you think, or that's an interesting way, and the lack, like, okay, a right answer, like we do need to be able to get right answers, but that's like it's the process, it's not the product. And I suppose the more students are going through just like enjoying the process, the answer comes in the end, and whether it's right or wrong right now doesn't really make big of a difference. So I find with the classes like like asking way more questions, like really wanting to participate. They want their work to go up on the board. They want they want, like, it's like this little spark goes off if you were like, I have the iPad and it's shared with the board, and like, will I take a picture of this, or will I show this on the board? And it's like everyone is scrambling, like, oh, but mine, and it's just this sense of like they want to show off their mathematical thinking, and there's just it is really flourished. Like, I see children just blossoming in front of my eyes over weeks. So what has gone from like crickets and cringy, like just cringy moments of silence, to now like there isn't enough time to get everybody's ideas up. I'm so sorry, we have to move on. Another thing I just find incredible with it, and it might be just the way the progression is, but it's the generalizations and the connections they're making. It's mind blowing that they're like, oh, but that's like what we did before. So even like, say we're doing 3D shapes at the moment and they're doing nets, and they're like, oh, but this is just like doing the surface area with 2D shapes. Or remember we made these compound shapes on the polypad and things like that. So it's, and like fractions, decimals, percentages, like they're constantly coming up the whole time. And it's just lovely for kids to see that, like, it's not, maths is not chapters, it's not a chapter in addition and then it's a chapter multiplication. Like, it actually all really does entwine together. And that happens quite naturally and fluently throughout the program. I don't know what kind of magic that is, but it's really good. It's great, and it's done, I haven't highlighted it for kids. I haven't said, oh, like, maths is all around us and it all integrates together. It just seems to come together for them. So it was just something like, with the compound shapes, and then the nets today. Like last week we were doing time zones and the kids were straight away like, oh, this is just directed numbers. This is just, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, actually it is. I didn't even realize, but like noticing. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway at the moment from it. And it's enjoyable. Like, isn't it lovely to be able to do something during the day that's actually a really good bit of crack, and you get to talk with the kids and really build up like healthy, trusting relationships with them that is just based on being a risk taker. Like, that's all we want for our kids, really, isn't it? Just to be a risk taker.
Yeah, don't be afraid of the maths.
Yeah.
It's I love how you described it as like the magic there. I think that's your magic, Patrick, of weaving in. That's what a series editor does. So
There's
definitely
it's 3 of us involved with that: myself, Kira, and the other editor, Shannon.
There's a lot, and I think, it's lovely to hear you saying all that, Maggie, because you're living it. And I think sometimes we do these webinars and we're trying to show bits of different things, but you can't really show the lived experience of using the program. So it's lovely to capture a little bit of that. And I would say to anyone who's online this evening listening to us, just go and try something with your class, because that's how you would see it come to life. And over time you'll see how that builds as well. It's impossible to capture that in an hour on here. But for anyone who is thinking of taking it on for next year, Siobhan, come back to you. Would you have any advice for schools that are thinking about doing it, or anything that really helped you guys along as you were transitioning to a new program?
Yeah, so I suppose when we started it, we started with the juniors to second, so the 3rd to 6th books hadn't come out yet. So juniors to second had started using the program first, and they just really liked it. So when the 3rd to 6th class books came out and we were looking at what program we were going to use, I kind of went down and I spoke to them, and they just spoke so highly of it and like really enjoyed the program and really liked it. So we said that we were going to go with it. Now in 3rd to 6th, we don't write in our books. So we were very conscious, or I was very conscious, of whatever program we choose. If we're going buying those books, we are sticking to that program for the next however many years. So what we actually decided to do this year was we just did the online platform. So we didn't actually buy the pupil books, and we just used it online from 3rd to 6th. Now we did buy the fluency books, which I quite liked. I like that whatever I've done that day, they then have that for like their homework, and that they can take home with the fluency book, and that it links very well. I found it linked really well in 5th. So I suppose I found that really helpful, and we have found it easier, I suppose, to work that way. The slides, what I like about the slides as well, is that whatever's in the pupil book is on the slide, and it gives you the page number and all of that. So the fact that they didn't have the book wasn't a massive kind of big deal. And some teachers still were kind of like, oh, I'd prefer to have a book. And I suppose that's just what's ingrained in us really, is to have a book in front of the children. If there isn't a book in front of them, what do we do? But I think that as the year kind of went on, people got a little bit more used to it, and there was more than whiteboards being used. There was more maths journaling being done, more in the copy. It was more a talk. As Maggie said, you could kind of let them do it themselves, and the onus was on them as opposed to just us at the top of the room showing them how to do it, like chalk and talk, that kind of thing. So we did find that handy now from 3rd to 6th to just kind of go online, test it out first. The other thing that I'd say, I suppose, about it is, especially being in the senior end of the school, so with 5th, when you come to like a topic or whatever, and you're flicking through your slides and they're like, they're not going to have a clue what this is because they've never met this before, because it is a new curriculum, it is a new way of doing things. I would often go back to the 4th class one. So I actually would maybe start my lesson on a Monday with like some of the 4th class slides to introduce the topic that way. And I suppose what I would say to like anyone, or what I've said to the teachers in my school, is don't be afraid to go back. It's not anything about you or about the children. It's because it's a new topic. It's a new way of doing things. There's new strategies been thrown at them that they've never seen before. So it is good to know that it's okay to just go back a year. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
To just kind of, I suppose, be aware that you can do that as well. And they've kind of found that really helpful, and like the children don't know any different. So, and that kind of, so I found that, I suppose, the best way. Like Patrick was saying, go through your slides. Sometimes I would go through them and I'd be like, I'm not going to get the whole slide done in one day. And again, that's okay. So some of it, I suppose my biggest advice would be, don't freak out. Don't think that you have to get absolutely everything done in one whole lesson, because, sometimes it's just not possible. And it depends on the class that you have in front of you then as well. If they fly through it, great. If they don't, just take your time. Like, you kind of have to go with what they're able for.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like the students in your school are very lucky to have you both, Siobhan and Maggie. I'd love.
They probably think these two like maths way too much.
Well, I was kind of sitting there going, I'd like to be in one of your classrooms. But then I also like maths way too much. So, but I do I think what you said at the end there, Siobhan, about like, don't be overwhelmed by the slides, because I think that can happen sometimes if you open them. I would even say, from my own perspective, every single set of slides that we've produced, I would have looked at some point. I, have helped with the review of them and so on. Sometimes I'll open them up and I look and go, 20 slides, and I even get that sense of, how am I going to get through all this just to review it? But then you realize it's because there's loads of step down animations of things, and that a lot of the time you wouldn't even need those in class. They're just there as your backup for you as a teacher to know, well, what's happening here? What am I looking for? Or if you decide to pick out one of those to show the children. So oftentimes it's just, there is options there, and that's a little bit of work to figure out. What am I going to do? And like you were saying, Maggie, about keeping your learning focus in mind. So I think there is definitely a little bit of work in it in the beginning, but like, that really pays off. And if you go to use it again next year, you already know what are the things you're going to use. So I think over time that'll get a lot easier as well. Folks, if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat there. And I mean, questions for me, Patrick, Maggie, Siobhan, anyone, direct them anywhere. I'll just have a quick look here at what's come up so far. We have had a couple of questions in. I know people are asking about multi-grade. Now, Patrick, I know you haven't taught, you don't have any multi-grade situations in your school. I don't know, Siobhan or Maggie, if you've got any multi-grade classes. No. We are currently looking into how we support multi-grade and how we can give better tips and guidance on how to use Maths My Way in multi-grade settings. So that's something that we're focused on at the moment. We have some focus groups coming up. So if anyone who is teaching in a multi-grade setting and would be interested in taking part in a focus group about Maths My Way in multi-grade, feel free to get in touch. Either you can get in touch with customer service here and they'll pass your details on, or you can drop into the chat just to say, yep, I'd be interested in that. And as soon as we have any more information, guidance, any updates around multigrade, we'll share those out with them, just with all of our teachers, because I know it's not just smaller schools, there are bigger schools that have multigrade classrooms in them as well. there was also someone asking there just about, are the online resources free or is there a fee? So basically the way it works, very flexible options. If you buy the books, you then get the online as part of that price you paid for the books. So basically buy the books, you'll have the online access. Or if you want to do like Siobhan and Maggie have done, where they want to just try the digital on its own without the books, you just pay a fee then for the digital. So it's whatever suits you best really. And I would really encourage everyone to talk to their local sales rep if they're thinking about using the program, and figure out what option is best for them in their first year of using it, or is best for their school context. So let's see here. Is there a list of maths manipulative equipment that a school or a class should have? So when it comes to the concrete resources that we've suggested throughout the program, we've kept them quite simple. We tend to reuse the same things a lot, and things that we know schools tend to have. So lots of blocks are being used, as you saw Patrick mentioned there, just literally strips of paper for doing fractions, which is really powerful actually. It's something we've come back to quite a bit. So we try to keep it as simple as possible. There are the odd, more specific thing for like measures and so on, but we do have lists. So there are lists available with the program and up on Folan's library, Folan.ie and so on, where it's like, here's the concrete resources that we've suggested for each class level. So if you're trying to organize your concrete resource cupboard or whatever, you can refer to that. I don't know, Siobhan or Maggie, if you've any comments on the kind of concrete resources and how you found kind of, are you finding you have to go looking for a lot of things, or is it things you'd already have?
Well, like Siobhan kind of has bought everything.
Mad, would you?
Yeah. So look at
Yeah,
no, I
we
don't
did
think
like an inventory, I
inventory.
suppose,
Yeah.
at the very beginning. Yeah, we did like an inventory of what was in the school, and then I sent out like a wish list what everyone would like. So we did do a nice big haul there at one point, maybe
Yeah.
2 years ago, where everyone kind of, so most of the classes would be well kitted out now, I have to say, in our school. But even in saying that, I just find even simple things like just giving them counters. Like if you have counters in your room, just simple little
Mm.
blocks, anything at all, like they'll use anything. I often give them just Play-Doh, and they break it up into little bits and do things that way as well.
Yeah.
Like you can literally use anything. And the more that you have, then the more that they're able to play with, the better it is, because you'll get all loads of different stuff. Lollipop sticks, keep it simple, really, is actually
Yeah.
nearly better than making it too complicated.
Yeah, I know it, and that's exactly the kind of philosophy we took with the program as well. As you can use whatever you have available. Like even if we might be suggesting using blocks, or the Dean's blocks come up a lot. But you've got other stuff available, great. And we often show ways of like how you could write stuff down instead. If you haven't got the actual physical blocks, you could draw them out. There's Polypad as well, of course. So for anyone who's not familiar with Polypad, it's interactive manipulative. So they're embedded within the slides or linked out to from the slides. So there's lots of different options there as well when it comes to resources. I'm conscious it's 8 o'clock, so I am going to just share a little wrap up about what you can do next. If you do have more questions though, or is anything there that we haven't gotten to, you can continue to pop them in. We'll go through them afterwards and get back to anybody if they've, looking for more information and so on. So let me just take you through now. You see my slides there, guys, if they popped up.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. I will just take you through just what you can do next if you're interested in finding out more, basically. So just a quick little note on practice, actually. It hasn't come up in the discussion this evening, but it is something that teachers do say to us a bit, is they're sometimes a little bit hesitant because Maths My Way isn't, the pages of sums that they're used to. And they're worried that maybe children won't get enough practice. So just to reassure you on that front, that there's the kind of hidden practice, we would call it, within, like what Patrick showed already this evening, where, the cherry problem, all the different things you can get out of that. So just because you open up a page and you might not see your 6 or 10 or 20 sums or multiplications or whatever it is, adding fractions, there are these really open activities that allow you to get lots and lots of practice in, but through this one context. So that is there. There's also a more practice button on a lot of our slides. So if it's the kind of thing where a little bit of repeated practice would be good to get children fluent at something, there are more practice buttons there. So watch out for those. We've put them there as a button because they're optional. Some classes might need them, some might not. Some children might need them, some might not. There are the practice pages that come at the end of every chapter as well if you are using the book. We also have early finisher activities coming soon. That's a new little feature we're going to add in if you need something a bit extra for a particular group within your class, and there are also printable worksheets available online. So there's lots and lots of options there for practice. So I don't want anyone to be, I suppose, worried about there not being enough practice. And that's just within the Maths My Way core program itself. But then if you're looking for something extra, Siobhan mentioned there the fluency books. So that they are a topic by topic kind of practice books, which a lot of people would use for homework. So they have a kind of Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday structure in them, and they match exactly what's happening in the books. Or new for this year, we have My Math Practice. So this is just being launched at the moment. A couple of samples of books flying around, people have gotten their hands on, but brand new, straight off the press. So this is a mixed topic revision. So very similar to what are sometimes called mental maths books.